Cancer Schmancer, Cancer Schmancer, take control of your body. Cancer Schmancer, Cancer Schmancer, take control of your destiny.
Welcome, all you beautiful ladies, to the Cancer Schmancer Tea Party. I thank you all for coming here today. Such a great opportunity for us to exchange ideas and thoughts and learn and figure out how we can help together shift the course of women's health history. Because when women empower themselves with knowledge, we are unstoppable. So it's very exciting, and for me it's a great opportunity to share my story of how I discovered that I had cancer, my battle with cancer, and then my survival of cancer, as well as anybody else here that wants to share theirs. I always like to start with this joke because I think that it's very pertinent. A doctor tells his patient he has good news and bad news. The gal says, well, what's the good news? And the doctor says, you have 48 hours to live. And the woman says, if that's the good news, then what's the bad news? And the doctor says, I was supposed to tell you yesterday. Too many people are finding out today that they have cancer when they should have been told yesterday. The moral of the story being, we have to become better partners with our physicians. We have to take control of our body, and we have to know what the early warning symptoms are, and we have to know what the tests are available. Nowadays, we really have to go into the doctor's office armed with information. I mean, we put more energy into the buying, selling, and repairing of our automobiles than we do into our own bodies. So I don't give anyone power of attorney over my money. Why should I do it over my body? I shouldn't, and neither should you. Because when the doctor calls and tells you you have cancer, at the end of the day, the doctor goes home and eats dinner with his family, while you go home and eat your heart out with yours. So ultimately, whose responsibility is it? It's yours. It's your body. It's you that has to be the most concerned. The doctor's busy, and doctors tend to be bludgeoned by health insurance companies to go the least expensive route of diagnostic testing. So they end up subscribing to this philosophy: if you hear hooves galloping, don't look for zebra because it's probably a horse. Unfortunately, very often, the earliest warning symptoms of many women's cancers mimic far more benign illnesses. So as a result, misdiagnosis and mistreatment runs rampant. With ovarian cancer, at its earliest stages, it looks identical to irritable bowel syndrome. And very often I'll run into a lady and she'll say to me, I was just diagnosed with irritable bowel syndrome. And I always say, honey, I hope that's what you have. But for a moment, step away from the gastroenterologist and go to your gynecologist and ask them to please do whatever tests are available to make sure that you don't have a problem with your ovaries, because you can be wasting precious time being mistreated and misdiagnosed. And particularly with a very aggressive cancer like ovarian cancer, time is of the essence. 80% of all women with ovarian cancer find out in the late stages, and 70% of them will die. It's what killed Coretta Scott King. And at Mrs. King's memorial, everybody that got up grandstanded about how great the Kings were, about the current administration, but not one person talked about what a shame it is in a country as great as ours that a woman like this should perish because we, as American women, are not offered the cancer screening test for ovarian cancer. And we're not even offered the most state-of-the-art diagnostic tool to let us see if there's even any abnormalities around the ovaries. So their silence that day spoke volumes to me. I myself had uterine cancer, which is the only woman's cancer with a mortality rate that's on the rise. It's what killed Anne Bancroft. Now, very often, misdiagnosis and mistreatment is a culprit. It took me 2 years and 8 doctors to get a proper diagnosis. Now, when I was first beginning to experience symptoms, I had no idea that I was going to end up on this 2-year, 8-doctor odyssey. And how many people go for a second opinion when the doctor is telling you you're essentially well. But I went for 7-second opinions. And if I hadn't, I probably wouldn't be alive today. I was misdiagnosed and mistreated for a perimenopausal condition that I didn't have. I was put on 4 different hormone replacement therapies. The last one, I started bleeding 24/7 from it, and I called the doctor, and the doctor said, I'm sure that I just gave you the wrong prescription, but just for safekeeping, get off it, and we'll do an endometrial biopsy. Now, let me just say, this was doctor number 8. Doctor number 1, 2 years earlier, had said to me, "You're too young for an endometrial biopsy." And me, like a schmuck, I didn't say, well, wait, what would that prove or disprove? I was just so happy to be too young for anything, I left it alone. And she starts treating me for a benign illness that I didn't even have. I had so many different symptoms. My stool changed, my breasts were very hard, and there was tenderness under my arms. My face started to break out, my legs started to hurt me all the time. Every different doctor had something else to say. The internist said that my stool changed because I was eating too much spinach. And the vascular guy said that my leg hurt me because I had restless leg syndrome, and he recommended that I should drink gin and tonics before going to bed. And the breast specialist said that my breasts were firm because, well, basically I had the breasts of an 18-year-old, which I do. So there I was with perky breasts in need of roughage, going to bed, sloshed in some vain attempt to cure myself. 2 years later, it was a simple endometrial biopsy that actually diagnosed my cancer. And even while the doctor was performing the biopsy on me, she said, quote unquote, "Fran, you do not have cancer." 3 days later, she was calling me and said, "I'm very surprised, but you have adenocarcinoma." And I said, "What's that?" And she said, "Uterine cancer." And I dropped to my knees and wept. And Lisa was there that day, and I was like, you know, my head was whirling and everything, and Lisa was there in my darkest moment. You know, from there, I was sent over to an oncologist. And my sister, God bless her, who works for a big hospital as a head nurse, said, have the oncologist do all her own testing. I don't want her to base what she's going to be doing off of other doctors' test results. And I didn't really feel like, you know, taking all the tests again, because believe me, after 2 years and 8 doctors, I got in the stirrups more times than Roy Rogers. But I always listened to my sister, my big sister. So I said, okay, now the oncologist said, "Fran, you know, this is you. We checked your name against the pathology report, the date, the tissue, everything. You do have cancer." And I said, "I'm not doubting that I have cancer, but my sister said that you should take all your own tests." So she said, "Okay, I'm going to do whatever it takes to make you feel happy, because you should have never gone 2 years without an endometrial biopsy." Staining between periods, biopsy. That's what we all learn in medical school. What happens between medical school and practice, I'll never know. But you should have never gone 2 years without a biopsy. That's exactly what she said. I'll never forget it. So she did her own test, and then it was a few days later that she called me back and said, you know, where the gynecologist in the office was picking up on cells, cancer cells that was grade 1 or just beginning to turn to grade 1. I'm now picking up on cells that are grade 3 and 4. Now I'm concerned, she said. Am I glad I listened to your sister? Well, I'm glad I listened to my sister too. But we have to be on top of everything. We really have to take control of our bodies. We really have to be medical consumers. We really have to be equal partners with these people, or we're going to slip through the cracks. And at the end of the day, we're the ones that are going to pay the ultimate price for it. Does anybody want to say anything or share a story?